Hello from Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City as what is called in modern times. Today, we were able to go to an area where the Viet Cong, or the guerrilla fighters, had their tunnels. And there were several layers of tunnels, like what we learned in class. And the first layer was sometimes meeting rooms and so forth. There's also a triangle, which you'll get to see, a triangle room where families and children would stay and hide. And then some of them would go down into many different layers where they would scurry through and then pop up. And you'll see a couple places where there's some hidden areas where it could open and then close, and it's really very hard to see. And this allowed them to be really quite a formidable force during the Vietnam War, because the Viet Cong, or the Northern Vietnamese military unit, there was only about 16,000 Viet Cong. They were a little bit different than the regular military fighting force because they had to be very small, could not be more than 1.5 meters, and some of these holes were like 1.5 feet wide. Very, very, very small. So you'll see some of the areas where it'd be really hard to see the openings where they would come up and were able to go back down very quickly. There's a lot of very short videos, but do remember, in looking at these, look at them as a historical perspective. Sometimes the guide is talking. There's always, different sides to things. And this is pretty much just talking about the tunnels and what the tunnels were used for. It was really quite fascinating. A lot of these tunnels were used in the Tet Offensive, which we talked about. There were tunnels in multiple different places. The area we were at was just a small sample. I think there's like 154 miles of tunnels. And it was, I guess, a very high concentration, a very dangerous area. And there would be a lot of bombing and Agent Orange and so forth in these areas to help get the Viet Cong out. There are going to be a couple different type of booby traps, and I'll show you some of those. There were several different kind of really deadly booby traps where they would have like either metal spikes with burrs on them, or in the tunnels were very small. I mean, the GI, the American soldiers, would get trapped in these tunnels, and some of these tunnels were very, very dark. And some of them had hidden bamboo pits. In the bamboo, I'll show you a picture of one of them. The bamboo, it's going to be the one where you see the grass flipping. The bamboo is dark because they would soak it in poison. And this is, just an informative video about some of the kind of things that military forces may have seen, but just kind of the techniques and so forth the Viet Cong used. It was really hard for the American forces to find them because they would hide underneath ground. And they would hide in some areas and they would pop up maybe like 20 feet someplace else behind the GIs and, would be able to launch a surprise attack. So it was quite interesting going into these tunnels. It was very dark. They made them larger for us, and even I had to bend over. It was very confining. And very dark and damp. The soil is clay and sand, so it was very hard. And they didn't really flood, but it's very humid and not a lot of air. Our guy was saying that in any room there could be not more than 5 individuals at one time because it would use up too much oxygen and it would be really hot and humid. But they had a lot of air holes in many different places, and I'll show you one of the air holes. They would build these big piles of dirt and encourage termites to live around them. So it looked like a termite mound. And that would be, holes that would allow fresh air to come in and out and so forth. But, I've always read about the tunnels, and it was very interesting to actually see some of them. And like I said, the ones that we crawled through, and you'll see a sample, were a lot bigger than what they actually were. Most people kind of scuttled down on their stomachs, and they would live in them all day long, and at nighttime sometimes come out. For what they ate for food, our guy was telling us that they couldn't have any spices in any food because any of the spices, when the smoke would eventually come out, the German shepherds would smell them. So they had it sounded like he was saying some kind of root of the plant, and then they would have boiled water. Pretty much that was the main part of the diet. They would eat rats and birds and bugs and snakes and lizards and things like that. He said during the war, people did have to eat different animals that would be in the forest for additional protein. As far as water goes, they'd have to dig down another 15 feet or whatever, and then they would hit a natural spring and bring the water up, because the water above was often poison from the Agent Orange and the bombing and so forth. So just take it as it is. Take a look at these, and the main purpose of these videos is to kind of show you the tunnel system, and some of the weapons that were used, because we do kind of talk about this in class some. If you have any questions, please post it. This is no statement or anything about anything. It's just kind of historically looking at some of the weapons and so forth and the tunnels, just to kind of help you have a little visual to kind of talk about to kind of visualize some of the things that we've talked about in class.